What's up, everybody? Welcome back once again to another episode of Upset Alert. It is episode number 71 of the Ultimate College Football Podcast, celebrating all 130 teams in FBS. Now, I've been starting the show the last few episodes with the caveat that it's only been 76 teams in FBS for the coming season. That has now changed. So of course we were talking just as recently as Monday about the fact that only 76 teams, excluding the Big Ten and the Pac-12, among others, would be participating in fall college football, at least at the Division I level. But this year, of course, everything is subject to change. So the Big Ten has reversed their decision. They are set to start this October. So just about a month away at this point from Big Ten football joining the fray, joining some of their other Power Five years, as well as, of course, three of the five Group of Five conferences in there as well. So, really interesting stuff as we get teams like Ohio State, Penn State, State, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, all those teams. I mean, there's a lot of great teams in the Big Ten, of course, all back into the fold now. Will, of course, create a lot more interesting matchups for us as college football fans this season. They haven't announced the finer details of that schedule yet exactly, but we've got a start date. We've got a date for the Big Ten championship game, conveniently the night before the final college football playoff rankings. Therefore, in theory, making the Big Ten eligible for that college football playoff selection committee there. So things are getting pretty interesting down here. As I've stated on our Twitter account at Upset Alert Pod on Twitter, if you follow us on there, you've already seen this. But I will be updating our rankings. We've been doing our weekly updated rankings for every team in college football. We will be updating those rankings starting this coming week. So not for heading into these games on Saturday, but after the games are played on Saturday, our freshly updated rankings this coming Sunday will add any teams that have been added back into the mix. So all the Big Ten teams will be back in there. I understand that they're not going to be playing games for about a month, but I will go ahead and add them back into our weekly rankings. Now, how much they kind of get skipped over because teams are actually playing games, that remains to be seen. We'll kind of take it on a day by day basis, essentially, as far as that goes. But yeah, things are definitely picking up here. Things are interesting, right? In the world of college football, you definitely can't say they don't keep us on our toes with this kind of stuff. We're now getting rumblings of the Pac 12 possibly following suit and trying to play football in October as well. But the issue there seems to be that the Pac 12 wasn't really going through daily practices, lifting weights, working out, everything like that in the way that the Big Ten has been for that entire period. So shouts to the Pac 12 for, not really working out much as a team, but then still trying to make an effort to get back to college football next month. It sounds like that might be a little bit more of a stretch for them than it was for the Big Ten, just because they don't want those players to go from no workouts at all to playing live football in 4 to 6 weeks. That seems dangerous for the players' physical health, completely outside of COVID-19 concerns, which, of course, are still very real as well. So, there's a lot up in the air, essentially, is what I'm saying. We haven't really heard a ton of rumblings about the Mountain West or the MAC getting back in action, back in Maction, if you will. But we're hearing these rumblings, of course, about the Big Ten that have now come to fruition. We're hearing some rumblings now about the Pac-12. So we'll keep our eye on that, our ear to the ground. And if you guys want to stay tuned on that news, know that we'll be continuing to share it as we see it at Upset Alert Pod on Twitter. And of course, right here on the podcast as well, live on twitch.tv/robotbraineater 2 times a week, normally Monday and Thursday. The time at which we go live varies a little bit, but normally we try to get live on podcast services by about 7 p.m. for those of you listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc. for both of those days. Today we're coming a little bit later than normal to you, so we'll try to be respectful of everyone's time here today. But let's take a look at this week 3 schedule. This is our week 3 preview episode, so we're going to go through this entire week 3 slate and see what we've got going on in week 3 of college football here. First and foremost, we don't have a Thursday night game tonight, hence why I am recording this episode a little later than normal. I like kind of spacing them out as much as possible without having to record them after a game's already been played, just for the sake of getting all these predictions in before any games have been played. But we're looking at Friday. So tomorrow, as I record live here on Thursday evening, Friday, September the 18th, we've just got one game on there. We're supposed to have Houston at Memphis this week. That got postponed due to some positive COVID tests. I believe it was on Memphis's team, if I'm not mistaken. We've got Campbell at Coastal Carolina. This is an interesting matchup to me, actually, and the reason being that we just saw Campbell, who, by the way, is a pretty good FCS team. They just pushed Georgia Southern to the limit. I thought Georgia Southern was probably in the neighborhood, at least, of the fourth best team in the Sun Belt this year. So not a bad football team, at least I didn't think so. They were missing a ton of players last week, but they looked awful against Campbell. Nearly lost. Campbell was a converted 2-point conversion away from winning that football game at Paulson down in Statesboro, Georgia. But they get Coastal Carolina this week. Coastal Carolina riding high off of an upset win at the Kansas Jayhawks. This is an interesting game for that reason to me. I want to see if Coastal Carolina just keeps putting lesser teams in the rear view. Are they going to be kind of a breakout team in the Sun Belt this year in the way that maybe, the top tier teams like we saw Arkansas State and Louisiana win last weekend? Can they kind of follow suit? They got the win against Kansas. Can they keep winning football games? Of course, Campbell should be a win for them, but Campbell has got to be feeling pretty good after coming so close to beating Georgia Southern last weekend. They might try to do the same thing again against Coastal, but I'm taking Coastal in that game. That's 7:30 on ESPN tomorrow night, by the way, at Brooks Stadium in Conway, South Carolina. Saturday, September the 19th, we've got a pretty decent slate of games here. You can see we had just a handful of them that have been postponed to a further date. Virginia at Virginia Tech, notably, was postponed, as well as BYU at Army. That BYU team that kind of just beat the brakes off of Navy recently. They're working their way through the branches of the military, apparently, trying to embarrass them one at a time. Army's a pretty good football team, at least from what we've seen so far. So kind of disappointed we don't get to see that one this weekend. But yeah, just a couple games that have been postponed, mostly, as you might imagine, due to COVID-19 concerns, some positive tests that certain programs have popped recently. So taking a look here, we've got Tulsa. I'm not sure why, if you're looking at this on video, I'm not sure why of all the teams on here, Tulsa's logo just didn't populate. We're just looking at Tulsa like in a Microsoft Word document, basically. But Tulsa at number 11 in the AP poll, I believe this is, that ESPN's following. Oklahoma State. That's the noon game on ESPN this week. This is the first look we're going to get at the Cowpokes, right? Okie State is kind of some people's sexy pick in the Big 12 this year. I think I'm still rolling with Oklahoma. That just seems like the safe bet there in the Big 12 year in and year out. Texas is kind of my fallback team. I do like Texas. I don't think I like them enough to pick them to win the conference, and I don't like Oklahoma State quite enough to win the conference either. But this is going to be a really interesting football team. I'd like to see just what they look like, right? You're not necessarily in a year where Tulsa doesn't look particularly great, probably. At least we don't expect them to. You don't really get a full feel of what Oklahoma State is going to be this year in this game, but it'll be nice to get a first look at them. Tulsa, like I said, I don't expect much out of them this year, so I do think Oklahoma State rolls in that game. Will be interesting to see what they look like overall, though. We've got Austin P at number 13, Cincinnati. That's on ESPN Plus for those of you who use ESPN Plus. That's a noon game as well. Austin P has been on the schedule week in and week out, right, playing these FBS teams. So shouts to Austin P for filling in the gaps on some of these folks' schedules. I know it is not probably any easier, probably much more difficult actually being an FCS program this year with a smaller stadium, less money in your football program, given especially all the money that they are losing, not having fully packed stadiums every weekend. So shouts to Austin P getting the paydays where you can from the FBS program. Cincinnati should roll in this one. Excited to get our first look at Cincinnati in this football game, though. We've got number 19, Louisiana, the Raging Cajuns at Georgia State on ESPN2 at noon. Raging Cajuns are one of the hottest teams in college football right now. Of course, they just upset a top 25 opponent on the road, Iowa State in Ames, Iowa. This is a really interesting Louisiana football team. They have the potential to win a lot of football games this year. Just looking down their schedule in that Sun Belt Conference, who do you really think is going to beat them? I'll tell you first and foremost, it's not going to be Georgia State this week. Georgia State is a decent, I hesitate to even say decent team. They're not a decent team. Georgia State is a bad team out of the Sun Belt, and Louisiana should run all over them in that game. I mean, it should be pretty ugly pretty quickly, I think, based on the way we saw the Raging Cajuns play against Iowa State. It would take a disaster for Louisiana to lose this game. Syracuse at Pittsburgh. Pitt is getting that number 25 ranking from the AP poll. This is 12 p.m. on the ACC network. I like Pitt. I like Pitt decently, I think. Syracuse might not be the worst team in the ACC, but they're not too far off from that. I think Pitt rolls here. Nothing really flashy. I don't expect it to be just this huge blowout win. Don't expect it really to be particularly close. But I think probably something in the neighborhood of like a 2-score, 3-score win for Pitt probably seems like a pretty safe bet right there. We've got our first look at Baylor hosting Houston at 12 p.m. on Fox. I forget, they call it the Big Noon Game or something like that. I think they have some kind of fancy name that they use to market that game. But Baylor hosting Houston in that one. Houston's a team that might be decent this year at best, probably, right? Um, Baylor is a team that comes in with high expectations, probably from their own fan base, but from no one else. Because everyone else, we talked about it all off season, everyone else is sleeping on this Baylor football team. Baylor did so much right last year, right? They had a great season. They came so close to beating Oklahoma both times that they played them last year. They went to the Sugar Bowl, lost to Georgia there, of course. But this was such a great Baylor Bears team last year that I think a lot of folks are forgetting about that because they're losing their head coach, Matt Rule. They're losing a lot of talent uh, on both sides of the ball. But this is still going to be a pretty good team, I think, at least. I've put them just a hair below Texas and Oklahoma State, and of course below Oklahoma in the Big 12. I think they're right on that plane below those top tier teams. And this is a Baylor team that could still make some noise in the conference, if not win the conference this year. I expect Baylor to beat Houston on Saturday. But Houston isn't terrible. Again, so first game for Baylor here. Don't be surprised, rather, to see them be a little bit sloppy in that game coming out the gate, especially with a new head coach. Western Kentucky hosting Liberty at 12 noon on ESPNU. Western Kentucky just got beat by in-state rival Louisville last week. Liberty kicking off their 2020 season in this one. The Hilltoppers are a team that I like a lot out of Conference USA. They didn't look particularly great against Louisville last week, but Louisville is also a good team. So hard to make too much of a 14-point loss there. I believe it's 35-21 in that one. I'm not too high on Liberty. I know they've got head coach Hugh Freeze bringing a little bit of the swagger to the Liberty Flames. But I think Western Kentucky is a significantly better football team. I think they get the win here without too much trouble. Tulane hosting Navy at noon on ABC. Navy had one of the worst performances so far this season. They absolutely did not even get off of the bus against BYU, lost 55-3 in that football game. They just didn't even show up, and I don't know how you can have any faith in the Navy midshipmen right now. They just don't look good at all as a football team right now. You've got Tulane, who's probably a decent team at best. Um, I don't know. This Tulane team is not bad. They're hosting Navy, who just look awful in that BYU game. So I cannot pick Navy in this game personally. I think maybe preseason I might have picked Navy in this game, but Tulane is okay, and Navy is just, oh God, they looked horrible. So I can't pick Navy in this game. I'm going with the Green Wave, one of the most iconic mascots in all of college football. Our last noon game of the day, Duke is hosting Boston College. This is at ESPN 3, so this one just streaming only. Um, Duke put up a decent fight against Notre Dame last week, I guess at least more than I expected them to, maybe. Boston College isn't great. Duke isn't great. I'll give maybe a slight edge to Duke with the home field advantage here and a decent performance last week. Boston College, I don't believe, has played a game yet, if I'm not mistaken. So, this one could really go either way. As far as making a legit prediction, I would stay away from it altogether. But just for fun, we're saying Duke with a slight edge in that one. 2:30 on, you don't see this a lot, USA. I don't know if I have ever seen this pop up, actually, a college football game on USA. Interesting too, it's a Notre Dame game. So I guess NBC has something else going on that day. I'm not positive. I'm not that tuned into TV schedules. I'm sure something huge is going on that I'm not thinking of. But number 7, Notre Dame hosting South Florida at 2:30 p.m. on USA. Nonetheless, I like the Fighting Irish here, and I like them big. There's not much else to say. South Florida is not a particularly great team. The only game we've seen them in so far was against the Citadel. They won that game like you would expect them to. Notre Dame is a much, much more talented team than South Florida. South Florida is not great. They are bottom tier in the American Athletic Conference. Notre Dame is a top 10 team legitimately. They will win this game and win it big. UTSA hosting Stephen F. Austin. I don't even know what to say about UTSA. I mean, you give credit where credit's due. They picked up a win last week over Texas State, right? Kind of a crazy game, double overtime. They're hosting Stephen F. Austin here, so I'm not going to pick against them or anything. But that was an ugly game last week. Texas State kind of coming in. I gave them a little bit of an edge, so give credit where credit's due. UTSA picked up the win last week against the Texas State team that I picked in that game. So they're a little bit better looking, perhaps, than I thought they would be to this point, but they're still bad. They're still really bad. They're hosting Stephen F. Austin. This is the type of team that if you were going to pick an FCS opponent over an FBS team, this might be your game here. But I am going to roll with the Road Runners of UTSA in this one. Georgia Tech, one of the hottest teams in America right now. If you can imagine that we would ever say that at this point in the year, the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets picked up a huge win to kick off their ACC schedule last week over the Florida State Seminoles down in Tallahassee. They're hosting number 14 UCF. I hope, and I am going, again, I have to do my best to speak with as little bias as possible whenever speaking about Georgia Tech. Not that they're a legitimate threat to my alma mater, Georgia, but I do my best to speak with no bias when I say Georgia Tech. I hope you enjoyed last week. You're not going to enjoy this one. UCF is going to Bobby Dodd Stadium and coming out with a blowout win. That is my full stop prediction right there. I think last week, give credit where credit's due to Georgia Tech for going into Tallahassee and winning that football game to kick off their season. 3:30 on ABC. UCF is showing why that number 14 is next to their name, and they're showing that maybe it's less that Georgia Tech is better than we thought, and more so that Florida State is still awful. This UCF Golden Knights team is the real deal out of the American Athletic Conference. They are as good of a group of five team this year as I think pretty much anyone is out of the group of five this year. I mean, you're talking UCF, Memphis, and Cincinnati all at the top out of the American. You're talking about teams like Louisiana and App State out of Sun Belt. So it's interesting. It really, really is interesting here looking at UCF coming to Georgia Tech because Georgia Tech is going to bring some hype into this game, right? UCF hasn't played a game yet. Georgia Tech not only has played one, they're 1-0 and 1-0 in the conference against traditionally one of the best football programs in the conference, not so much the last few years. UCF, though, is going to come in here and I think just stomp a mud hole in them. I'm going to say they win this one by 4 or 5 scores. I like UCF big, big, big in this game. Moving right along, let's take a look here. Appalachian State at Hawaii, or excuse at Hawaii. I saw the green letter there, misread. Hawaii isn't playing this fall, just to take away any credibility I might have had there. Number 23, Appalachian State at Marshall. The Thundering Herd. This is the 3:30 CBS game. Isn't that weird? 3:30 CBS game, not an SEC game. Of course, the SEC hasn't started yet. That might have a little bit of something to do with it. But App State at Marshall there. I like this game. I like this game a lot because App State looked less than stellar against Charlotte. They did not look like a conference champion against Charlotte. This is a team that looked pretty darn sloppy, and they're now going to be playing on the road against Marshall, who's a pretty good group of five team out of Conference USA. I like App State in this game because I think they're going to start to get it together. This might be a sloppy win for them too. I think the head coach growing pains are there, but I do think App State gets it done on the road at Marshall. Moving right along, we're still in that 3:30 time slot here. Georgia Southern, App State's biggest rival, right next here on ESPN. Georgia Southern hosting Florida Atlantic. This is another interesting group of five matchup because, like I said, Georgia Southern looked real sloppy last week. They were missing a lot of guys. They cannot afford either of those things this week if they want to come out with a win against Florida Atlantic. I've got FAU in this game. Of course, Lane Kiffin rebuilt that Florida Atlantic football program into what it is now. They are a Conference USA powerhouse, a perennial conference championship contender. I think they will go down to Paulson and pick up a win. So shouts to Florida Atlantic there. 4 p.m. on the ACC network. I know this is the big marquee matchup you've all been waiting for. Just kidding. It's the Citadel at Clemson. The Citadel at number 1 Clemson. There is nothing exciting to say here. Clemson is rolling big time. 4 o'clock on ESPN2. Middle Tennessee hosting Troy. This is one of those that's a little difficult to predict because both are probably not great. If you had asked me just a couple of weeks ago when we did our preseason predictions, even, I would have picked Middle Tennessee in this game. I think Middle Tennessee, out of the bad teams in the country, is a team that could beat some of those other bad teams, right? They're not quite the bottom of the barrel, but they looked like the bottom of the barrel against Army when they got blown out and gave up 42 points to that Army offense, of course, driving down the field on them. They had some incredible 15 to 20 play drives, had one for 99 yards, I believe, against the Blue Raiders defense. I have zero faith in Middle Tennessee to do anything right now, so I'm picking the Troy Trojans on the road. I'm rolling with the Sun Belt. I think the Sun Belt is one of the breakout stars of this 2020 season so far. We had South Alabama upset Southern Miss, and then just last week we had 3 Sun Belt over the Big 12 upsets, of course, with Coastal Carolina over Kansas, Arkansas State over Kansas State, and Louisiana over Iowa State. So I'm rolling with the Troy Trojans at Middle Tennessee. That looks like a win for Troy to me. SMU at North Texas. North Texas, give them credit. They've got a win on the board. 6 p.m. on CBS Sports Network. Their perfect season comes to an end. SMU, Shane Buechele, and company are going to roll in that one, I think. SMU had a little bit of a crazy game against Texas State. Lots of turnovers, lots of goofy plays, back and forth kind of plays. But I like SMU to clean it up a little on the road against North Texas. North Texas is not a particularly great team. SMU has definitely got more talent. They've got a great offense that can put up a lot of points on the board. I like the Mustangs. Game of the week right here. Number 17, Miami at number 18, Louisville on 7:30 p.m. on ABC. This is an interesting game right here. Last week, both of these teams looked really impressive to me. Louisville, of course, put up 35. They get the 35-21 against in-state rival Western Kentucky. This is a very explosive Louisville offense when it's really clicking. And you had Miami last week who played against UAB, a team that, maybe we thought could compete with them, come in. And while it didn't look pretty in the first half necessarily, at least not passing the ball, this Miami defense looked legit, and this Miami rushing attack looked really great. I like that Miami rushing game. I like the Louisville quarterback a whole lot. I honestly don't know how sold I am on De'Aaron King as a passer at Miami, but I am rolling with the Hurricanes on the road here. I like Miami in this game at Louisville on Saturday night. This should be a good one, though. I'm really excited, actually, to watch this football game. Miami and Louisville being good is good for the ACC. It's good for college football. I think it'll be really interesting. Louisiana Tech at Southern Miss, 7:30 on ESPN2. Southern Miss, of course, looked awful in that game against South Alabama. I do think they'll recover and still have a good season. I preseason picked them to be the Conference USA champion. That's not looking so smart right now. But I think there's definitely a chance they rebound, and I think that rebound starts here against Louisiana Tech. Southern Miss, if you lose to Louisiana Tech this early in the season after losing to South Alabama out of conference, it's time to begin reassessing your situation, right? So barring some disaster here, I do think Southern Miss recovers. I think it was a little bit of a fluky game against South Alabama. They got beat straight up, of course. No one's taking that back. But I like Southern Miss, the Golden Eagles, to rebound against Louisiana Tech this week with their first conference win. Texas State at UL Monroe. This is a battle to see who's not the worst, right? Who's not the worst in the conference. Texas State, like I said, had that exciting matchup with SMU, but they lost to UTSA. They're not looking particularly great. You look at UL Monroe, they look real bad too. They got beat up on by Army. These are both bad teams. I like Texas State marginally better than UL Monroe right now, so I'm giving it to the Bobcats in that 7:30 ESPN U slot. 8 p.m. on the ACC network, Wake Forest at NC State. ACC matchup of two not particularly exciting teams. Honestly, at this point, Wake Forest looked okay at best against Clemson. Maybe about like you'd expect for a team that has lost all of its biggest pieces from last year's offense. So not particularly explosive in the way that they could be last year on offense at times. NC State is an okay football team. Again, at best, they're probably. So the Wolfpack not particularly thrilling either. I'm going to take NC State at home here, I think is what I'm going to roll with. This one really is a coin flip to me. I could go either way. You ask me tomorrow, I might pick Wake Forest. But I think I'm going to roll with NC State for now in their home game. And then finally, 9 p.m. on ESPN3 to close out the night. It's UTEP, the Miners, hosting Abilene Christian. Again, like I said with the Stephen F. Austin game against UTSA, if you're gonna pick an FCS team to upset an FBS team this week, this is as good a candidate as anyone. Just because UTEP is terrible, we've seen them get blown out by Texas already. We've seen them pick up an FCS win already, though, as well. And for that reason, I'm not going to pick Abilene Christian to get that crazy upset moment here. I'm rolling with the UTEP Miners to go 2-1 through the first 3 weeks. And that is something I never thought I would say back before all the scheduling changes. Because this is a team, if you've been listening to the show for a while, you know that I actually picked to go 0-12 for the regular season back when we did those predictions. But I like UTEP to at least be better than Abilene Christian on this particular day. And that is going to wrap up the week 3 preview right there. So we're taking a look then at week 3 for right now, at least. But we've got so many games coming up. This Saturday, of course, will be the last Saturday for now without SEC football. We've got SEC football coming starting September the 26th. We've got the Big Ten joining next month. This is pretty exciting stuff. By the time we record another episode, maybe we'll know more about what this Pac-12 situation is. Who knows, but we'll be keeping an eye on that news, of course, and tweeting all of that, sharing all of that at Upset Alert Pod on Twitter, as we always do. So if you want to stay up to date on the news of the college football world and when we're going live here on Twitch, follow us on Twitter at Upset Alert Pod, hashtag Upset Alert on Twitter if you want to shout us out. If you want to just drop us a line on there, feel free to. I'll shout you out on the show. We'll read your comments out on the show. Or if you want to comment live, then join us twitch.tv/robotbraineater if you follow me on there. Of course, this isn't the only content on that channel. It's my personal channel where I do other things, play video games, and that kind of nonsense as well. But if you want to follow me on there, then I will be more than happy to shout out your comments as you drop them as I record live on video and for podcast services around the world. So if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, whatever it may be, give us a subscribe, a follow, a like, whatever it is on that service on there. And if you can, take the time to leave us that 5-star review. We greatly appreciate it. It helps us get more eyeballs and more ears on the podcast. Again, I just want to thank you guys so much for listening, checking out the podcast here today for episode 71. We're going to wrap it up, rather. And until Monday, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, and we will see you later.